Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
All right, so, Jesse, if Elon happened to watch our Mind Walk episode, I was wondering the other day, where could Elon be in 5 years?
So you're talking about the Mind Walk episode. Not everyone's seen it, by the way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you haven't seen any of the Mind Walk episodes, I encourage you to do so. They're very, very interesting.
Yeah, they're a way to help you kind of visualize goals 5 years from now, try and be in a place where you want to be.
It's a really nice thing, I think, in the beginning of the year, when a lot of people have resolutions and plans, to start thinking about your future and where you can be, especially in that 5 years, because that's kind of the tangible region of what you can actually kind of accomplish.
Right.
It's not just sort of a retirement goal. It's more of like, where do I want to be?
Right. Yeah, it's. I picked 5 years because that's long enough to actually get you something something big. But if it was, say, like 1 year goal, in 1 year you can accomplish quite a bit, but you can't do as much.
Okay,
and 40 years is just so far off that we would lose interest.
So you're saying 5-year plan for Elon Musk,
right?
You think he doesn't already have plans?
I think he does.
Okay.
I think he's way better at this than I am because obviously, look at what he's achieved. But I wanted us to start picturing what Elon and Tesla and SpaceX and all that could look like in 5 years with actual hard numbers. So I followed my own advice in Mind Walk. I sat down for about an hour and set up a spreadsheet. So here's the spreadsheet, and we're going to share it with all of our Patreons, by the way. And so we're going to share the spreadsheet and then ask our Patreons to come up with their versions, more rosy versions, more conservative versions, because these are just numbers Jesse and I just picked out of our heads. I mean, it doesn't mean they're actually going to happen, but I do think it's going to be helpful to kind of envision where the companies could be in 2023.
Right.
If you watch Mind Walk in episode 2, you'll know that you go to the farthest column, the year 5 column, and you start filling in where you'd like to be. So I started thinking that way for Elon. I started thinking, let's just take the first line here. I said, and again, we're doing this as if you're telling a director how you're going to film the story of your life, right? So like, director, what are all the things that you need to know about my life so that you can make a film about my life?
In 5 years.
In 5 years. And so one of the things that a director would need to make a story about Tesla would be, well, how many gigafactories do you have? And where are they? So I put into the row G, year 5 column, I put that there would be 8 gigafactories in the world. And then if we move down to the next line item, showrooms and service centers. A lot of people ask us all the time, like, is Tesla going to be able to keep up? How many showrooms and service centers are they going to need? And so I put in this number, and this number is a formula. It's based on the number of cars, because I took the number of showrooms and service centers they have today versus how many cars they have on the road, and I just scaled it up to the same ratio.
And so I think that this is an important point for, me personally. If I were making my own 5-year plan, does that number need to be the exact number?
Yes, I think yes.
The
more exact you can make it, here's what happens. When you put something into that, like a lot, they'll have a lot of showrooms.
I see.
Then what happens is your brain goes, okay, I don't know what that looks like. Just like a screenplay, like a screenwriter wouldn't know or a director wouldn't know. So they would be like, how do I shoot that today? Do I set up 1,000 showrooms? Do I set up a CGI with 1,000,000 showrooms?
But I mean, if we're off by, say, 500, it doesn't make a big difference here.
So, I mean, a lot of people get hung up like, should it be 5,148? Here's my question. When you wake up in 5 years and you've got, say, 5,000 showrooms, are you going to be happy with that number?
I mean, I suppose so. I mean, and
I think you'd be a lot happier than if you only had 2,000 showrooms. So what I'm saying is, give your brain a number. Does it have to be that granular? Does it have to be 5,147? Probably not. It could probably be 5,000 or 6,000. But give it a number so that you have something that you can target to, as opposed to a lot.
Right. And so this one makes sense because it's tracking with the number of cars.
Right. So that if you're happy with the number of service centers and showrooms today, then you'll be happy with that number in 5 years. Now, maybe you're not. Maybe you're like, they need a whole lot more than that. In which case, you should change that number. Right.
Interesting. Okay. So then let's move on, I guess, to service vehicles. Right now they have 373. If we were to scale that up with the number of cars, which we're going to get to, we would end up with 5,257.
Right.
it could change. Like, it could be different.
Exactly.
And along your 5-year plan, you would say, I've figured out something. We need double the number of vehicles. Or it's geographically based. It's like, for a particular continent needs this number.
Exactly.
Or something
right.
like
Maybe
that.
you find out in Australia you need more of them than you do in Europe. But here's the thing. We're using a Google spreadsheet. And the reason I do that is because you want to be able to change these numbers daily, basically. You want to look at this plan every single day and go, gee, why did I assume that? That was dumb. I should change that.
And you don't have to go in there and erase it and write in 5,257. You can just go in there, you can click on the box, and it's an equation. And so you can just change one of the values.
So basically, it's a ratio to the number of total number of Tesla vehicles.
Right. So you can change that ratio, and then all 5 years are now re-updated.
Right. Exactly. So much easier than pen and paper, where you basically have to pretty much start from scratch.
And do all that math.
Also great because you can share this. So for instance, I can share it with Jesse, and remotely he can be working on it and it'll update, and we could share it with more people like we're doing with you Patreons. And see how powerful that is? Sharing it with lots of smart people around the world means that we're probably going to come up with a pretty good plan.
Right. I mean, this is what we came up with off the top of our head, but someone who actually can do some deep research into, like, hey, by the way, I think that my number would be different based on news reports that came out from different times. I think that there should be more service vehicles. Exactly. All right, so let's move on to some other ones.
Okay, so number of employees, not that important, but just to give us some idea. And this one I'm probably way off on. I just estimated you need 10,000 employees per factory. So that's where I come up with that number. Supercharger locations, that's pretty important. I based it off of, we have 1,400 supercharger locations today. I kept the same ratio of superchargers to cars and just ramped it up. So that would change if our car numbers change. Same thing here with supercharger connectors. That's the number of actual wires that plug into your car. So you'd have to have 161,000 in 5 years. Destination chargers, we have 20,000 today. This is the number you'd have, more than 250,000 in 5 years. Again, good to just picture. Is this realistic? Could there possibly be, almost 300,000 destinations?
Right, because you can do a check. You can be like, okay, well, I guess how many hotels are there in North America and the rest of the world? How many, true destinations would there be? Are there 250,000 places? And then you can go and look and be like, oh, you know what? All the hotels in the world are only this number. Oh, I guess my calculation is wrong. I guess there's going to be a cap on the number of destination chargers, or we're going to need to come up with some other place for destination chargers to live.
Exactly.
Superchargers, the same thing. Like, maybe you can get too dense a number of superchargers, and then you can look at some place like Hong Kong and be like, oh, I guess you can just stuff a city full of superchargers.
Right.
Because, I mean, look at Hong Kong for a second. That's insane. That could be New York City. That could be San Francisco.
All right, so if we go to the next row, which would be Model S annual deliveries. And so I just based it on last year, 2018, we had 50,000 deliveries. And so I just came up with some numbers. I don't necessarily think these are right. I was pretty conservative. So I came up with, in 5 years, they'd be selling 145,000 of them. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Next row is the cumulative total. So every year you add on what you've built the previous years. And so that would bring us up to 789,000 Model S's, just to give us an idea of, in 5 years, how many Model S's will be on the road.
And that's if we're assuming the same amount of growth.
Right. And this is a pretty linear growth curve I made, very low linear, because I thought it's a luxury car. I just thought we're not going to really have that much growth over the years for a luxury car.
Right now, if you want a Model S, you can pretty much get one unless you live outside of the service area of Tesla. So, there are lots of places in the world where you can't really get a Model S. Like, sure, you can get your hands on one and buy one and charge it at your house, but there's no superchargers, there's no service stations.
Right.
You'd be in trouble. Owning one in the middle of Siberia.
And as we just learned on Tesla Time News yesterday, the price has gone up quite a bit. So this is really a much more luxury car than it was before.
Yeah.
So with Model X, there should be about 90,000 total sales, annual sales per year, which would bring the cumulative total up to a little under 500,000. Kind of cool numbers here we're starting to get into is Model 3. So Model 3, I assumed that by 2023, we would have enough factories so that we could be making 1.5 million cars. This is just a rough back-of-the-envelope estimate that Jesse and I came up with. It could be a whole lot higher. I was pretty conservative. I think we were pretty conservative when we came up with this number. So, Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But if that's true, then the cumulative number would be about 4.5 million Model 3s on the road in 5 years.
Wow. And this doesn't assume crashes and floods.
Correct.
And people.
Yeah, there's a small percentage
them.
every year that would come off the road so that Rich Rebuilds could work on them. And that didn't take that into account.
Right.
But that's because that's so granular, I didn't want to get into it at this
Right.
point. Next is the semi-truck. And so I assumed by 2023 that we'd have about 50,000 on the road. For some, that might be wildly optimistic. For some, that might be very conservative. Because again, just to remind everyone, we're coming up with a picture of the future so that we have something to let our brain really focus on. But that now gives you a target to say, oh, well, we have to have 50,000 on the road in 2023.
Right. And then you can reevaluate to be like, is that realistic?
Right. And that would mean that the cumulative total of semi-trucks on the road would be 61,000. Next, we go down to the Roadster. I thought by then we'd have 3,000 being produced annually with about 6,000 cumulative on the road. Then we get to the Model Y. We're picturing that they could be making a little under $1 million a year with a little over $1 million already on the road. And we'll show you how we got there. Then we get to the pickup truck, and we kind of thought about 300,000 produced a year. Sounds about right. And that would mean it would only be in its second year, so there'd only be 350,000 on the road. And the model, we're calling it the Model T, but this would be what?
This would basically be their the cheapest Tesla that they would have ever produced. So it'll be even cheaper than the Model 3. We're thinking it's going to be something like a Leaf in price or cheaper.
Yeah, like maybe it'll be like a Model 3 but cheaper parts, or maybe they'll have come up with cheaper batteries by then.
Or
but anyway,
something in the like 18,000-ish range.
Yeah, I mean, Elon's talked a couple times in talks about a $25,000 or less electric car. So we figured that would be really cool. So we figured that he might unveil that, let's say in 2022, and that he'd be able to make 100,000 a year starting in 2023. So that gets us to how many Teslas will be on the road in 2023, and by our numbers so far, there'll be 7.6 million. Tesla makes other things. Let's not forget, they make power walls, power packs, mega packs, solar. So let's look at those numbers. For Tesla power walls, cumulative megawatt hours would be, we thought, 34,000 megawatt hours. So 3.4 gigawatts of power walls. Same thing for power packs. Really hard to track these numbers because Tesla doesn't usually break them out. We're just being really rough here. We could get much more fine-tuned if we want to. For mega packs, which are those new big grid utility scale packs, we thought 1.7 gigawatts would be cumulatively produced by 2023. Solar panels, the traditional boring solar panels, we thought that there would be 4,500 megawatts installed throughout the world. And then solar roof, which is just starting to get placed on normal customers' roofs this year. We thought that there would be only about 200 megawatts installed by 2023. Now, something exciting that we hardly ever talk about is the Tesla network. What is the Tesla network?
So Tesla is saying that they're going to have fully autonomous self-driving cars, and that would allow them to create a Tesla network. So that would be kind of like a driverless Uber network. You could, buy a car, it would drive you to work, and then you could say, all right, buy car, go make me some money. And then it would go drive off and pick other people up and drive them to where they needed to go. And then it would pick you up at the end of the day and take you home. And then you could say, okay, I'm going to go to bed, buy car, keep making me more money. And it would go and pick people up. So that would be the Tesla network.
Right. Now, no one's even priced this into anything yet or even talked about it yet, but I'm going to make an assumption. Could be wildly wrong. I'm going to assume that by 2022, Tesla announces that the Tesla network is up and running in one city.
Now, why are you saying one city?
Well, remember how we saw Marquise Brownlee, his video at CES this year, where he got into an autonomous taxi by Yandex, and he sat in the back seat, there was no driver, and it did a 15-minute route through Las Vegas autonomously.
Yeah.
It had a big LiDAR radar camera suite on the top, and it was just on a Toyota Prius, and it was able to drive that route safely. And we've seen that a number of times, Cruise, Waymo. I believe it's going to be a thing, and Tesla will not be the only company doing it.
But, okay, so why only one city?
I think that to really achieve it so that the regulators are happy and so that it's really redundantly safe, you will need to map an area. Even though I've talked against mapping for the longest time, I do think that mapping would be that next level of assurance that the car really knows what's going on in that city, and that with this suite of stuff, whatever it is, cameras, LiDAR, it would know if there's people in front of it, cars in front of it, all that kind of stuff.
And so that would work inside of a city. do you think that you would still be able to go long distance? If if you got in say, Los Angeles and you were like, take me to Las Vegas, it would be able to navigate through Los Angeles to get to the freeway, to drive you out to Las Vegas. And then in Las Vegas, it would be mapped, and then you could...
Once you'd mapped a number of cities, yes, I think you could drive between two mapped cities, because I think highways we're already shown that those are pretty easy to do. So here's my thought, is that Tesla would take a city, Los Angeles, San Francisco, whatever, would map it so that it could basically say, if you live in that city, our network works, turn on your car, it's autonomous. Okay. And the regulators have agreed to it, which means that the next year, my estimate was that 6 cities in the world would be mapped to the level that you could turn on your Tesla network. Think about that for a second. If I'm right, then Tesla just has a brand new business model with a whole new revenue stream, which is basically an autonomous Uber network.
And on top of that, it actually creates an opportunity for someone who couldn't afford, say, a Model 3, or in this case, a Model T, or whatever cheaper models it has, depending on what keeps full self-driving, to be able to afford a car like that, because they wouldn't be using it the whole time.
Right. It would be making them money. In fact, it would be a business investment for most people, that they would just say, like right now, you're an Uber driver, right? You bought a car and you decide to drive it for a certain number of hours a week for other people to make money. Now you wouldn't have to drive it. You would be doing your other job or sleeping or fishing, and the car would be out there making money for you. Also, all those people in the world that need to drive to work but don't want to buy a car would now have a new option that would be wildly cheaper than existing options, because as we know, Ubers right now, you're paying at least 1/3 to the driver.
Right.
So if you could reduce your Uber cost by 1/3.
Well, and that's even beyond, because EVs are cheaper to run.
Right.
Maintenance-wise and fuel-wise.
Right. So who's to say it wouldn't be even half or less?
Right. And I mean, conceivably, you could even have it so that it would charge at your house, which was solar powered, which means that you're basically pumping it in with free energy.
Exactly.
That would, again, drastically limit your costs.
Right. So I'm throwing this in because, again, we're trying to imagine something in 5 years. If you don't imagine it, it won't happen. So better to imagine it, and then maybe I don't get my 6 cities. Maybe I only get 2.
Right. Or maybe it's that we don't need to map.
Right.
But the imagining kind of lets us build a framework for thinking about this kind of thing.
Right.
Because right now, saying 6 cities in 5 years is okay. I can picture that. I think could be more cities.
Right.
Now you're able to say, oh, I would increase that. Or you can say the presupposition that you need to map, I think is false.
Right.
And now you can actually have a conversation about the future.
Exactly.
Whereas before, it's sort of like, oh, in the future, there'll be the network. And that's all I can think about.
And see the problem we had before? Humans usually either talk about next year, because it's so concrete, like what's going to happen next year, 2020. Or they do what a lot of companies do, and they say, what's going to happen in 2050?
Right.
And it's
or they just go, oh, that'll happen in 30 years.
So if you leap too far in the future, 2050, I can't even wrap my head around it. Right. At least I can't. It's so futuristic. But 5 years from now, I can kind of picture it's far enough off, but amazing things can happen in those 5 years.
Right. I mean, I like to think of, sci-fi from the 60s, what they thought the 2000s were going to look like. Ooh, we're going to have jetpacks and flying cars.
RoboCop.
And RoboCop and everything like this. And then, you're watching the movie and it's like 2019, New York. And it's just like flying saucers. And you're like, guys, you didn't really... That is not what happened.
But there's shows like Star Trek, which was in the 60s, and they did get a lot of things right. I mean, we're not beaming anywhere yet, but they got communicators.
True.
They didn't get Klingons, but I mean, they got some things right.
Well, that shows that imagination part. If you can imagine something where it's like, Kirk to Enterprise,
right.
Then,
you can make it.
Boom, I have it now.
Right. I mean, what if Kirk didn't have a communicator? Would we now have cell phones? Maybe that wouldn't have happened.
No, we would just have cans with very long strings.
Now we get down to some numbers here, and so I'm going to show you how I got this number, but I think that Tesla could easily be getting $130 billion of revenue in 5 years. And these numbers actually come from our buddy Galileo Russell over at Hyperchange. I just basically lifted his numbers because I think he's awesomely smart at picking stuff, and I was lazy and I needed to fill out my spreadsheet. So I actually think these numbers are going to be higher because he didn't account for a lot of things we're accounting for, but I'm being super conservative here, and I'll show you why. So then the next line down would be Tesla's operating income or profit per year. Year 5, I think they would be making, just like Galley does, $18 billion a year. Now, if that's true, I project that their stock price would be, and this is Tesla's stock price, would be $4,500 a share.
No, you can't. There's no stock that is $4,500.
Well, so usually when stocks start getting wildly expensive, they do stock splits. And a stock split means that, for instance, if they did a 10-to-1 split, they would give you 10 shares at $450 a share to make it so that it's affordable. And stock splits happen all the time.
Okay, so that means that I would get more stock, but everyone would get more stock. So we're all on the same playing field, except now
it's diluted.
You can basically buy a tenth of a stock now, but it's now one stock for a tenth of the price.
Right, and that's done just to keep the price in a reasonable range so that everyone's kind of talking.
But I mean, that's over 10 times the stock value.
Well, let's look at Tesla's stock price so far. So Tesla IPO'd, and when they IPO'd at about $17 a share, what does that mean? If it's now at, say, $340, that means it's gone up 20x.
Oh, okay. But that's from a very small. That's from a very small company. I mean, that's not a huge growth.
Okay, let's look at this stock chart of Amazon.
Okay.
And let's look at what you could have bought Amazon for, back in the day. For many, many years, you could have bought it in the $20 range, right? And it had a number of points where it went up seemingly incredible amounts. Now, looking at this chart, you would say, well, I only see this latest incredible surge. But that's because we had to put it in the scale of things.
Right.
But if you go back, there was many times where the stock looked like it was going incredibly high.
Okay.
It's already had a bunch of 10x's.
Right. I mean, there are some points not that long ago where you could have bought it for $160, and now it's at $1,600
Right.
a share. So, I mean, okay, so if it has the same kind of growth as Amazon...
And let's remind ourselves why Amazon has this incredible growth. What did Amazon do? It disrupted something. It took stores. You used to... Remember this, folks? You used to... I need some new slacks.
Right.
I need to walk down to a store and go in there. Now you go, doo, 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 and a day later you get a box with slacks
and
in
it didn't just disrupt one thing. Like a lot of people seem to think...
It started with just books.
Right.
It was just a online bookstore.
Right. And so it disrupted bookstores. Now it's disrupting basically all sorts of online retail.
Right. Things you didn't think you could buy online. I never thought you could buy clothes online. I thought you had to try them on.
Right. Or food.
Right.
Or... Right. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can now buy online that, you'd never dream of.
And they're talking about things that sound science fiction, right? Drones coming to your house with deliveries. That may be happening before we know it. So I'm just saying disruption, if it's done correctly, equals huge growth.
Okay. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at Tesla disrupting the automotive industry, disrupting the energy sector, which is a huge sector.
Right.
Like, energy is the largest market. It's the most money.
Right.
And they're going to disrupt that along with automotive, which is another very huge market. They're not disrupting, mustache comb manufacturers or anything like that. They're disrupting huge industries. So to say that they wouldn't have large growth would be foolish.
And I just think if you go back in time 5 years and you talked about a Model 3 that would come out and be making, 150,000 cars in 1 year, and that there'd be 400,000 people on the line to get it.
Well, and the performance numbers of that Model 3 of like these are basically Model S specs for way less price.
Right.
I think a lot of people would have said you're crazy,
and they did. I mean, look at there was so much FUD, so many news outlets that said this isn't going to happen. This guy Elon is lying to you all. He will never build a Model 3. It will never happen. And it did happen. And so that's why I think this is totally realistic in my mind that what other company is doing this? I mean, let's talk about car companies for a second here. We already reported on Tesla Time News that all the other car companies in 2018 declined in value, in stock value.
True.
So I think the writing's on the wall. Everyone knows the existing big auto has no new ideas, no innovation happening. The innovation is happening from companies you've never heard of before. The Rivians, the Neos, right? Those are the companies that are coming up with, let's take the battery out of the car. Let's come up with a adventure pickup truck. That's where the new innovation is coming from. Those could be the companies, I know it sounds crazy, those could be the companies that are going to buy out Ford and GM plants that are going out of business.
It's true.
So let's continue real quickly. I thought, well, Elon also has these other companies like Boring Company. So how many boring tunnels will there be in 5 years?
Right.
I conservatively thought maybe 4.
And those would be 4
Operating tunnels.
real tunnels. So
Right.
this is not the test tunnel that they just dug.
Right.
We're talking like high speed.
People going through them.
Yeah.
And so I figured maybe 12,000 passengers a day would be going through those tunnels. For SpaceX, I thought, okay, well, how many Falcon 9 launches per year? I think we both thought 90 sounded pretty good.
Right. I mean, right now there's 19.
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, 90 in 5 years is not such a huge jump.
And they might not even be using the Falcon 9 by then. Maybe it'll be all Falcon Heavy or all, Starship, but whatever.
Right.
I thought, okay, well, Falcon Heavy, we should put that on there. So 20 launches of Falcon Heavy in 2023. How many launches of Starship going to the moon? I figured 3. How many Starships going to Mars? 1. And then how many SpaceX Starships? I don't know. We won't call these Starships.
Earth ships?
The Earth ships. So these would be the rockets that'll go and land on the other side of the planet. So I figured by then there would be 3 actual launches that had taken place.
Yep.
I think I'm being conservative, but who knows? This is rockets we're talking about.
Right. It's rockets, and this is SpaceX. The growth that they've seen recently is huge,
But
humongous.
again, there's a huge power in putting those numbers in a box for 2023, because some people will say, well, Zach, you just put the number 3 in a box. Who cares? But what I did there is, if you're running SpaceX, is you're going, oh, okay, in 2023, we're going to have 3 launches of an intercontinental rocket that will bring you from, say, LA to Shanghai in 45 minutes.
And then you can say, is that realistic?
So let's go back. So that we basically have just been looking so far, you've just been seeing that column. And you're like, well, that's great, Zach. You painted this pretty picture, you two, of what's going to happen in 2023, but how did you get there? So let's go back to column B, which is the current column, what's actually happened, so that we can see where we're at now. So if we go back here, and I'm not going to go through all the numbers, you can kind of look at them yourself, but number of gigafactories, we have 3 right now, right? We have California, Nevada, and we have New York. Showrooms, we've got 351. Service vehicles, 373. We have 45,000 employees. And so as you're seeing, all these numbers, 1,400 supercharger locations and so forth, these are all actual numbers. These are actually what they've put out today, so that we have a basis for where we're at today.
Right.
Because let's be realistic. When we're trying to picture where we want to get to in 2023, we could put incredible numbers, things that couldn't happen. That's not the point. If you do that, then you're setting yourself up for failure. You want to put something that's realistic or maybe a little beyond realistic to push yourself, because the mind is so incredibly powerful. And as Elon has shown, if you bring a bunch of intelligent people together, you can do amazing things.
Absolutely. So let's go to the biggest driving factor for a lot of this stuff, especially in the automotive sector, gigafactories.
Yep.
So right now you have 3. I don't know if I would even count the New York plant as 3.
I'm counting Fremont as a gigafactory because it is doing, it's huge.
I don't know if I would count it necessarily. So I might go through on my sheet. I would
Be
go
more
through.
conservative?
I would get rid of 2 on each column. So moving forward. So
Oh, you only have
we
one?
one.
Wow.
I mean, even right now, we don't even have a full one. It's
True.
only a third complete.
True.
So I mean, I would say, maybe if you want to say, started and producing.
Sure.
Then I would say, sure, you've won.
Yep.
The next one obviously is going to be in Shanghai.
Yep.
And they want to be producing cars by
By the end of this year.
Right.
Now, I don't think there'll be volume, but I think they'll be ready for volume at the beginning of 2020.
And so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be 100% complete, the factory. Just like the Gigafactory in Nevada is not 100% complete.
Right.
It could just be one square and they could be making cars. But so, I mean, there's growth within the factories.
Right.
So instead of, so we're thinking Shanghai as the next Gigafactory location.
Yep. Then year 2, which is 2020, I thought Europe, right? We both thought either Netherlands or Germany, probably.
Right. Then year 3, you say Shenzhen.
Yeah, it's close to Hong Kong. It's in a new location in China. So I figured you want to spread them out in China because China's huge, right? And so you want to make distribution easier. So I just randomly picked Shenzhen.
So that could easily be somewhere else.
Right.
I'm
just saying another China factory.
Okay. Then year 4, 2022, Michigan or Ohio. So you're saying a closed GM plant.
Yeah, I think a quick, easy way would be by then, I think Ford and GM will have some for sale, like completely shuttered and ready for sale, just like a Rivian picked up one in Illinois. So yeah, that was my supposition, is like save money, just buy a pre-existing plant.
And then finally, year 8, 2023, you're saying Beijing.
Yeah, I figured China, again, is your biggest market by far. And so 2 plants is probably not cutting it. And you probably need a third one. Beijing is a new city, spreads out your distribution even more. But again, that's just random. It could be anywhere in China. I think third Chinese factory.
And so then we get to write all these down. And that doesn't necessarily mean that all these are going to happen, right? I think this is a point that we're bringing up a lot in this show. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but it helps you imagine. It's a tool. It's a jumping off point for your brain.
All sorts of questions come up that get cycled through. And if your whole team is on the same page and they're all thinking like that, then when you have meetings and talks, you're all on the same page. You're thinking like, let's discuss this. Whereas if none of this is written down and it's like, yeah, Tesla's growing. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do something. Then you're all just running around. You don't know what you're doing.
So anyway, we wanted to show you this 5-year plan, and you can see the numbers of growth here. So looking at some of the other vehicles that are going to come out, we're looking at the semi-truck, the Roadster, the Model Y, the pickup truck, and this unknown Model T. Maybe they probably will call it something else. Right. But that's just a placeholder name. So we're seeing, not a lot of volume production with the semi-truck until about 2021, 2022. So that kind of ramps up there. Then Roadster, also not a lot of ramp up till 2021, 2022. Model Y, kind of the same thing. So a lot of ramping up at the same time.
Right. And this is where, again, it's nice to have a plan because you might be like, that's dumb to do all that ramping on all those models at the same time. Let's spread them out. And so I could be completely wrong.
We encourage our patrons, who we will share this link with to this spreadsheet, to copy the spreadsheet and make changes and then share it with us. And then we might be able to, using computers, put everyone's predictions together and kind of show the average.
I kind of think of it like when you go to a county fair and there's a big jar of, I don't know, what's in the jar?
M&Ms.
Okay, so M&Ms. And it's, a huge number, right? And they say, guess the number and you win the jar. And any one person can't guess the number accurately. But the amazing thing happens if you have like 1,000 people that come by and write down their guess and then you average their number, usually comes out very close to the number of M&Ms in the jar. And you might say, how's that possible? Some little kid guessed 3 and some other person guessed 1 billion. But it's because averaging all of our guesses actually gets quite accurate. Same thing I think would happen here. If you take a bunch of intelligent people, have them looking at this and using the strengths that they know about and adjusting numbers to things they kind of know about, I'll bet we could come up with a pretty accurate roadmap to what might be happening.
Right. And so, I think that this is an important tool. It's an important tool in every person's life to have sort of a 5-year plan of where you are trying to get to, right? What is your goals for 5 years from now? And that's scary, but...
It's not scary at all for me to enter numbers on the spreadsheet. Why? Because I don't have to build anything. I don't have to do any of this.
Right. And you don't have to answer the shareholders if those numbers don't get met.
Right. Pretty scary for someone like Elon if you think about it, because every single number we put here, he's going to get scrutinized over whether he hits it or not. And so if he puts down, I'm going to have 8 gigafactories by 2023, and he only has 7, everyone's going to just be like, you failed.
Right. And it's the same thing for a personal 5-year plan. If you're like, oh, I want to move to Honolulu, and you're still in, Normal, Illinois, that kind of sucks. You're like, oh man, I didn't hit my goal. It's scary to write down, oh, I want to move somewhere different, or I want to have a job that pays this certain amount of money.
So what do you tend to do?
You tend to just back it down. Okay, I'm not moving to Honolulu. I'll move to San Diego. I don't think I can have a job where I earn $100K a year. I'll earn, $65,000.
So what did Jesse just do when he did that, right? He told his brain that's what he wants. He wants to be living in San Diego earning $65,000 instead of Honolulu earning $100,000. So what does his brain do for him?
Because it's trying to protect yourself.
You created an image that your brain now says, well, that's what Jesse told me. He wants this San Diego $65,000 job. That's what it tries to get for you. It no longer is even trying for the Honolulu $100,000 job.
Right.
Because you didn't tell it that's what you wanted.
Right.
That's what's so powerful about this, is it's better to tell it something that you really want and not quite make it, maybe you'll make it the following year, than it is to just be like, I just want to stay with the number of gigafactories I have this year.
And there's sort of this Elon time and this, Elon numbers where he's like, I think we can do this certain thing by this time and have this number of vehicles or whatever. A lot of times he won't hit those numbers, but he'll be darn close. Right. Or he'll be, just a few months behind.
Right.
And it's very hard 6 months before he hits the goals that he was going for people to be like, oh, okay, well, he will hit them. Because if it hasn't happened yet, it hasn't happened yet.
Exactly. So many people just rip you down to shreds if you don't hit every exact thing you said, when you said it, how many you said. They don't give you the benefit of like, wow, look what you've achieved, Elon. You're almost there.
Right.
They go, there's the finish line. You haven't made it.
Right. And that is another thing. I mean, it's interesting to be able to equate this back to, just one person and their goals for a 5-year plan is that, maybe you don't hit it in time, but if you still have it as your goal of like, man, I know that I had planned to move to Honolulu, 6 months ago, but I'm just not there yet. I need to save more. I need to get a job that will pay me enough or whatever, whatever the steps are that needs to happen. If you're still pushing for it, you can still make it because no one can estimate everything perfectly down to the letter. It's setting the goal and then reaching the goal eventually.
And this is where I wish that we were able to support Elon better, because ultimately his goals are not to make more money for himself. His goals are altruistic. They're for the betterment of human society.
That's true.
So yes, if the stock goes up, he makes more money, but he's making it not on the backs of pouring pollution into people's lungs. He's making it on making clean energy revolution. And so I wish that as he tried to achieve these, we're like, we're with you, Elon. You may not have hit your time target perfectly, but wow, what a goal you have.
Right.
So I hope this was helpful, and I'm really excited to share this with the Patreons and see what they come up with, because I was a little optimistic on some and a little conservative on others, but I'd really love to see like what the majority of people are thinking.
Yep. Thank you for joining us on this episode of In Depth. We do it every single week. Done it for quite a number of weeks.
Yeah.
Not as many as the Tesla Time News, but we're
getting there. Yeah.
We've never skipped one.
No.
We do this every Tuesday. We do Tesla Time News every Monday. We do a tip of the week every Wednesday and a Mind Walk every Thursday.
Yeah, there's a 4-part series on Mind Walk now about just what we just talked about today. So I urge you to go check that out.
So thank you so much for watching. Now you know.